Miami, Florida State. Joe, Miami is able to come out with a win against Florida State on the road. The first time Miami was on the road this year. When you go back and you rewatch the game, you break this game down, you recap it. Your thoughts on the game?
Blake, I am vindicated. I have been proven, and I said this the last 2 weeks, and I'm standing by it. Miami is the best team in college football. Look, I give Florida State some credit. They scrapped their way back. They tried to get back into this game. Miami realized that they were winning and that they could coast their way in the fourth quarter. They took their foot off the gas. But outside of that, I saw 3 quarters of an ass whooping. And a lot of the things that we talked about in the preview came to fruition. A defensive team that is extremely fundamentally sound, bottled up Castellanos. Mm-hmm. He only had 57 yards rushing, and they forced him to have multiple turnovers.
40 came in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. He had a bunch of turnovers that this defense capitalized on. And then we watched Carson Beck. When the run game didn't dominate as much as it usually does, he didn't have a running back over 50 yards. As I keep talking about, they're the most balanced team in college football. So when they can't run the ball, Carson Beck takes over. Malachi Toney takes over. CJ Daniels takes over. Last bit before I throw back to you, Blake. Malachi Toney is so freaking good, man.
He's so good.
They had a solid receiving room last year, and the offseason narrative with Miami, Blake, was what do we expect from this offense, losing Restrepo, losing Sammy Brown, losing a lot of the guys that were generating production, Arroyo, that were targets for Cam Ward. You got a true freshman who just turned 18 who's running past everybody. Blake, this Miami team has everything that I would look for a team that is a legitimate title threat. And I think that even if the game almost slipped away a little bit there at the end, I don't think it should take away from how dominant that they looked for most of it.
So let me just say one thing on Toney that's the most impressive thing about him, and it's not – nobody wants to talk about this with the receivers. Mm-hmm. He is one of the most willing blockers at wide receiver, even at his size, that I've ever seen. Joe, he is as scrappy as they come, and to be honest with you, all of them play that way. Now, I challenged CJ Daniels last week. CJ's a guy who – last year did not live up to the expectations that he holds his own self to, and he had a massive game. Mm-hmm. But, Joe, great teams, and Miami fans are about to gasp about this, even though I had them in my top 3. Great teams are able to win games in multitudes of ways. Joe, they didn't run the ball worth a shit. And that is the fact. You had 3 yards to carry. It was not to what you're built or what you want to do. I tweeted this to you during the game. I thought both tackles were exceptional in the run game, especially 61 on the right side, as always, everybody wants to point out. I think the left tackle, the 6'9 kid, was moving human beings. Why they didn't keep going to outside zone stuff, that's neither here nor there. Regardless of that, great teams can win shootouts. Great teams can find ways to win in a knife fight. And that's what Miami did on the road for the first time that they had to go on the road this year, and they did it. There was a part in time in the game that Carson Beck, for whatever it's worth, had more touchdowns. You're actually halfway through the game. He had more touchdowns than he did incompletions. He was 10 for 11 for 3, and he had 3 touchdowns. But, Joe, the game was completely won and lost by the decision by Mike Norvell. Now, do I think Miami had complete control of the game the entire time pretty much until the fourth quarter, like you mentioned, that they started coming back? Yes. The decision by Mike Norvell was one of the dumbest decisions I've ever seen. What am I talking about? You go for it on 4th and 8 on the 41-yard line when you could pin Miami deep and get them and play field position and potentially try to get – and you know what Miami's going to do. What is a Mario Cristobal-led team, when you're holding them to 3 yards of carry, going to do? If you get them pinned back, they're going to run the football. And so you could play some field position. The interception by Castellanos on the 4th and 8 in the first half, then when you go under center, play action, Toney on a deep drag or deep over for a touchdown, the 44-yard bomb, Joe, I got to be real with you, it was ball game. Ball game. I thought that both teams were really throwing some haymakers early and doing a lot of really good things. But I felt as if after that, the Miami team completely, not that they didn't have momentum, they took over the momentum and it felt over. Now, again, we talk about Florida State being very scrappy, going on a 96-yard drive in the fourth quarter, 19 plays, and being able to get in another touchdown that would have got the onside kick to be able to win. I get all that, like you mentioned as well. But you brought up the point about the completeness of Miami is what you're trying to say here. Mm-hmm. Are they the most complete team in the country? It would seem that way because they can beat you in so many different ways. But, Joe, here's the thing for me, and we want to point on how they lean on you offensively. Mario's best friend is the only person he gives access to along his offensive line. We can talk about all these different storylines about how they do things. The way this team generates turnovers is vintage Miami. The secondary with Poyser and company forcing these turnovers. Joe, I don't know if their edge unit can be blocked. Not by anybody in college football right now. They have the best edge room in the country, and it is not close. You may be on to something. They might be the most complete team. Now, you get into the game, and you look at it a little bit more specifically. The 19 points in the fourth quarter, I thought Miami was very scrappy. But I thought the receivers, when every time they needed a big play, you talk about Tony, but C.J. Daniels, for what it's worth, I think you saw the eye black, by the way. The Kyron Lacey situation, I think, was held dear to C.J. Daniels representing, scoring 2 touchdowns. C.J. Daniels had his more P4 coming out party, even though he had the ridiculous catch in week 1 versus Notre Dame. That kid had some drops, but he really found his own way and did a lot of things that people expected him to do. They just beat you in so many different ways. I thought, for what it's worth, Shannon Dawson I thought Shannon Dawson called almost a perfect game. And what do I mean by that? Not because they scored a crap load of points, but Joe, I just felt like he knew how the game was moving and things were perfect for him and how he did things. Coaching staff was absolutely phenomenal, and the players fed off of that as well.
Well, I think that one part with that thought in mind, it allowed for us to contrast the two programs and where they currently sit. I think that it's a little interesting when we consider how 2 years ago, the trajectory for Florida State was completely different. If we approached each other 2 years ago and we said, and we told you, we asked you to state which team do you think has the better coaching staff, the better coordinators, is better recruited on their offensive and defensive lines, you might have said Florida State. This is the big part, and this is a little bit more of a Florida State directed point of analysis. Florida State's first win against Alabama was a great win, and it was a great way to start the season. But it is going to take time. As we said this offseason, it takes time to be effectively recruited enough along both lines of scrimmage to rebound from the awful season that you had a year ago. Now, Florida State's improving in high school recruiting. And when we end up doing our National Signing Day show like we always do every single year, I would hope and I think that we're going to be talking more positively about Florida State because they've recognized that they need to be more deliberate in high school recruiting in order to have a more sturdy base.
Right.
But this, to me, Blake, was the difference between two teams that are on completely different levels in the pace of their growth and their development. We saw for this Miami squad that where everything that they have totally leaned into bolstering took over. It goes to Francis Mauigoa, CC Mauigoa, I believe is what his nickname that he goes by, and apologies if I'm mispronouncing. I think it's Maui Noah might be his pronunciation for that. And Ruben Bain were two guys 3 years ago. They were highly recruited kids that stepped in as true freshmen and played early and showed really amazing signs for what they could be. And they stepped on the field and they kicked ass. That is, those two players, I think, really exemplify where this Miami team has taken the step forward that many people thought that they couldn't get to. Sometimes it's easy for us to point at coaches, Blake, who struggle in these big games and who struggle at finishing seasons like Mario Cristobal has. But the thing is that there was evidence for us to have looked at, which was the fact that he was just slowly adding bricks, slowly getting better every single year to this point now where it does feel like they are a legitimate threat. They have a very favorable schedule coming up for this remaining stretch of the season. So the ball is in their court. They are in the fast lane on the highway. There is no reason why they can't finish the rest of the season undefeated.
Well, Joe, to that point, again, you're talking about the cycles of recruiting from Miami from high school and then developing from within and then adding things through the portal to be complete. Joe, their longest run from a running back yesterday or the three main ones, I should say, was Fletcher for 10 yards. He went 12 for 40. Brown went 8 of 19. Lyle 7 of 18. They had rushes of the long of 5 and 6. So you sit there again, and Carson Beck throwing 4 touchdown passes. He's not even doing the things, Joe, that I felt like that we saw him having to press. Now, here's another thing. You went and got him, and I want to talk about Carson Beck in this regard. Joe, last year's Carson Beck without a running game throws 3 picks. He throws.
I don't think it's a bad take to have. He's a completely different player.
Well, and not only that, we literally saw it. What are the 2 games that Georgia lost? Really 3. What are the 3 games that they lost last year? What did they all have in common? Carson Beck having 3 turnovers, throwing 3 turnovers because he had to be the dude and be Superman. He says in preseason, look, I felt like I had to be Superman. I'm just playing with inside the offense. So when I talk about Shannon Dawson calling a perfect game, Joe, almost a third of his completions, or a fifth of his completions actually are touchdowns. Let me say that again. A fifth of Carson Beck's completions are touchdowns. That is insane. So you sit here and you say, look, do I think, and I tweeted this at you in the beginning of the game, and we talked about this during the game. What did Florida State do? Joe, they completely put 7 to 8 men in the box. We tweeted it. Next drive, you got Herbie up there circling that they got 8 guys in the box. They were not allowing Miami to come in there and run the ball on them. They just weren't going to allow it, and you had to be very physical. So they opened things up, and the question mark around Miami and the receivers, it is what it is. Malachi Toney went for 107. C.J. Daniels had 2 touchdowns on 78 yards. But, Joe, you got to throw this. The 2 biggest things that they made themselves complete. We just talked about Carson Beck. This secondary has got dogs. Poyser might be one of the best safeties out of the portal. He was one of the most.
He was every time on the broadcast. You heard every 5 minutes Poyser on the play. Poyser on the play. Yeah.
And so, Joe, there was a reason coming out of Jacksonville State that everybody wanted him. Well, look at last night, because they asked him to do so many different things. Come down in the box and help and contain. Come down in the box and help and run. Then when he did, he forces a fumble. Then he's in great positions to make plays. So not only when you're talking about that completeness and how they dominated yesterday, it from high school recruiting and then going into the portal. Now, let me ask you this. What do you make of Florida State now? Now you're 0-2 in the ACC. You're 3-2 on the season. And, Joe, I got to be real with you. You got beaten 2 completely different ways. On the road, you got beat by a quarterback running all over the place, and then you stop the run this time, and then Carson Beck just completely dimes you up. I mean, this seems like a little bit just a lack of depth for me defensively.
Well, and that's what my whole point is here, is that this Florida State team is not – it's not bad. It's just not complete, because it is a multi-year. You were so awful last year. It was going to take multiple years to dig yourself out of the rubble. Mm-hmm. They're also like Miami. They have a very favorable schedule down the stretch. Their next 2 most challenging games that they face, Clemson on November 8th, which I would think that they should beat unless Dabo pulls something out of his hat, and they've got Florida on the 29th. Pitt coming up might be a little spicy, but we don't.
Well, they just benched their starting quarterback,
and that true freshman that they put out there threw for like 350 or something like that. So Florida State can rebound and finish this year with 2 losses, but the realistic thing to expect is that because they've lost the way that they did to UVA and they lost the way that they did in this game, they're probably going to drop a game that they're not supposed to. They're probably going to lose to Clemson or a Virginia Tech or a Wake Forest or an NC. Like one of those games is just going to completely sneak up on them. Sadly, I think that they've kind of boxed themselves out of the playoff conversation. I don't think that they're going to be as a real playoff threat because of the way that they play.
I got to be real with you, Joe. I know Florida. Stay with me. Yeah. I know Florida's 2-3. There's no way that you can't look at Florida and say that team's not going to give Florida State a hell of a run. I mean,
it depends if Billy's still there. If Billy's gone, do they just
Billy keeps winning out? Well, I mean, if Billy keeps winning.
Are we going to do that bit again? Are we going to do it again?
Joe, the man turns into Nick Saban when he's about to get fired.
I'll save it till we get to that game. I'll save my thought on that, but it's funny.
Hey, but you know what I'd say right before the season next year? Billy, if you lose the game, you're getting fired. They might go undefeated. I'm
just saying it's become one of the funniest tropes in college football of what if Billy Napier keeps winning and nobody knows what that means anymore. I don't know what it means anymore. It just, he wins games when you think that he's done.
But see, here's the thing. The only thing I'd say, if you get that play from Ball, Lagway, and now you see those two freshman receivers, you got to start asking questions.